This week on the Baseline Podcast, we have a bonus episode for you all. And with Josh away, I am joined by a very special guest, a friend of the show, and a great host of the Fifth and Goal podcast. That is Aaron Lynn. We are joined by him, and we're going to talk about everything college football. We're going to break down the Ohio State versus Notre Dame game all the way down to the nitty-gritty, from our players of the game, some things we thought went well, things we thought went bad. We also break down other games around the country. We finish up by talking about our power rankings and our Heisman watch list for week 2 coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast. It's more of a bonus episode this week, and as you can tell, Josh is late. No, I'm kidding. Josh is not here today. We actually have a very special guest, someone that you guys recognize before Josh was my co-host. He was the very first guest of this show, and that is Aaron Lynn of the Fifth and Goal podcast. I have the merch on. I'm pretty sure.
Love to see it.
Am I the only person in Europe that has this merch? Like, do you think
I would have to believe so? Yes, I would have to believe so.
I'm first at something. Dad, I made it. Dad, I made it. But no, we're so happy to have Aaron on. Aaron and I have known each other for a long time. If you don't know, he's a proud Cedarville alumni and Fifth and Goal. I remember watching their first ever podcast / stream. I don't know what you guys called it. Their draft show. So everything over there, they're doing a great job. He'll plug that in at the end. But we're here to talk about week 1 of college football. As we all know, Ohio State played Notre Dame. As you know, probably if you're listening and you've been listening to this podcast, I'm a Ohio State fan. Josh is a Florida fan. That's why I kicked him off this week. No,
there you go.
No, Aaron's a big Ohio State fan. We live and die Ohio State, and so it's very important that we talk about this and what we think of the game. So, Aaron, how are you doing? Doing good?
Man, I'm doing good. It was so nice to have college football back. It's something that I've looked forward to for months. And just to finally have it there on Saturday, I basically did nothing but just watch football all day long and grilled food and like just an awesome day. It helped that the games were amazing throughout the week. Like obviously Saturday, there were some good games, but we started the week with Thursday, the backyard brawl. That game was amazing. Sunday's game between Florida State and LSU was just absolute chaos. And then, last night, Monday night's game was just so. It could have been more exciting if Clemson did worse, but I'll take it what I can get, but just an awesome week. So really no complaints over here. It's good to have college football back. And of course you said you're a Buckeye fan. I'm of course a Buckeye fan too. So a pretty good win to start the season for Ohio State.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great win. I agree with you on the football thing. I actually watched the Clemson. I was reading an article today that said, can Clemson get any worse and still win ball games? It is a fact that we will be probably talking about here a little later on. And it's interesting with Ohio State. As many of you that listen to the show, you know that I've been high on Ohio State this year if they could fix the defense, right? And we'll get into all that here when we talk about Ohio State. But before we jump into it, Aaron, I want to get your just straight up thoughts. So after watching that game, you sat through 4 quarters, kind of breathing heavy for the first 3 quarters. I think we all were. What were your initial takeaways before we really get into the nitty gritty here about the Ohio State game?
Yeah, the first half was frustrating, and it was a first half that as Ohio State was leaving the field, you thought, man, they should probably be up by a touchdown or 2. And instead they're trailing at halftime, and that continued into the third quarter. But overall, I was impressed. Like I have to remind myself at the end of the day, this is the first week of college football. There's no preseason, and Ohio State welcomed in, whether you think they're deserving of the number 5 rank or not, they welcomed in the number 5 team in the nation and ended up beating them by double digits. And at the end of it all, there was 2 things that stuck out in that game specifically. Number 1 was Ohio State's ability to tell Notre Dame, hey, we're running the ball, and still effectively ran the ball, because they did not do that last year. Yeah. And the defense looked worlds improved from last season. I know it's 1 game, so I'm not trying to overreact too much to what we saw in week 1. But and look, I think Notre Dame's probably an average offense this year, but there were plenty of average offenses that made the Ohio State defense look bad last season. So I was extremely impressed. Again, no points allowed in that second half. I think like 80 yards allowed.
It was something like that. It was ridiculous.
It was an impressive performance by the Ohio State D. And look, I think it's also, there's a real possibility that's the worst Ohio State's offense is going to look all season.
Yeah.
You didn't have Jackson Smith and Jigba. You had some injuries throughout, and you still got the job done. So overall, I was impressed. Was it always pretty? No, but that's a tough win. That's a great way to start the season. And now you've got a couple tune-up games before you take on Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was interesting, right? Like the way, I think as Ohio State fans, and Aaron, you grew up around this brand of Ohio State as I have. And we know that Ohio State fans can be very critical, sometimes way too critical, to the point where we were so used last year of seeing Ohio State put up 50 points, 45 points, 40 points, that even when I did my prediction last week, I was like the low end of Josh and I said 45 points, right? Like that was the low end, right? And I think we do have to remember that Notre Dame was the 5th ranked team in the country. I don't believe they were the 5th best team in the country, but what I'm saying is that, anytime you have a 5th ranked team versus a top 2 team, it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be in the grits and in the ground. And one thing that I brought up before the game with Josh was I said, whoever wins the line of scrimmage will win this game. And I think what we saw is that Ohio State was tired of getting called weak. They were tired of getting called that they weren't strong enough, that they weren't bullish enough. They weren't going to, be that bull in the china shop and just don't care and just go get it. And I think you look at some of these other teams around the country, and we'll get to them. I still think Ohio State was probably one of the most physical teams all weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at some of these hits that, Eichenberg was laying. I mean, I loved watching him. First off, it reminded me of AJ Hawk. As soon as I was watching this game, I'm like, this is AJ Hawk reinvented and rebirthed in some cases, right? But my biggest takeaway from this game was that Ohio State was willing to play old school trestle ball in order to get the W. I never thought I would say in the positive light that we played trestle ball. I never thought ever in my life that I would say trestle ball in a good light, right? But it truly was a brilliant performance. You take away some of those big plays, the 54-yard catch, the juggling catch, the one-handed weird catch. You take away those big plays, the Ohio State defense literally shut down an offense that, by the way, is capable of scoring touchdowns. I think they will do that this year. But overall, I just think the Ohio State defense shocked me more than you will ever understand. Like I literally went in there going, okay, they might give up 25, right? 21. And I remember when they came out and said, hey, we want to be the 5th best defense in the country. I was like, is that Knowles? Are you pushing a little bit? And after watching this game, I'm like, this is the basic defense. Like this isn't even the complicated stuff. And they're already doing this to teams. So I'm super excited, Aaron. I think it's going to be a great year. I think these next 2 games will be key. But I want to let's focus on the offense first, because we know that this is where both of us, I think, were a little shocked that it kind of came out flat. I'll be honest. I really feel like the offense did not come out with the way they should. What is your initial thoughts on this offense after you've watched this game? Maybe some good things you saw, but then also some negative things that you think need to be improved on before we get to Wisconsin, which will be a big battle in the physicality side.
I think it's easy as Buckeye fans to just immediately jump on the Ohio State offense because they didn't pass for 400 yards. They didn't score 40 plus points. What they did do is they methodically moved the ball against a defense that was keeping everything in front of them. The way that Notre Dame had their safeties play.
They had 2 high safety look the whole time.
Yeah, the entire time. Some of the plays that CJ Stroud made, I know he didn't have gaudy numbers. He had like 220 yards passing, but some of the plays he made rolling out of the pocket right as he's about to hit the sideline, throwing a dart to a wide receiver, diving towards the sideline. So, and some of those were key, critical 3rd down conversion pickups. You talked about the line of scrimmage. You're absolutely right. That was a key difference. 3rd down conversions were also a huge difference. Ohio State was like 8 for 13. Notre Dame was 4 for 11. I want to say some in that ballpark at least. And that was a huge issue for Ohio State last year on both sides of the ball. They were very bad at giving up 3rd down conversions, and they struggled to pick up 3rd downs at times when a 3rd and 2. If I'm a Buckeye fan, and you're right, it's funny to talk about Trestle Ball, 20th anniversary of that team getting honored, which is just awesome. But I don't care what your offense is like. If it's 3rd and 2, if I'm Ohio State, right, as an Ohio State fan's perspective, where we're better than everyone else, right?
Yeah.
If it's 3rd and 2, I want to look the opponent in the eye and say, we're running the ball for 2 yards and getting the 1st down, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And that's what they did. And so I think if you compare that with the passing game, which again, I think that might be the fewest number of passing yards they have in a season this year, because, and even if Jackson Smith and Jigba misses a couple games. Oh, and honestly, if he's not healthy, don't play against Arkansas
please.
State and don't play against Toledo. The Ohio State clearly does not need him to play in those games.
No.
So I think I'm not as critical as some Ohio State fans are, simply because I do think Notre Dame's defense is really good. And I think they'll be a top 10, top 15 defense in the country this year. And just the way they schemed Ohio State, it was going to be very, very difficult to break big plays against them. And for the most part, there really weren't a lot of big plays, but like Myron Williams taking over that drive in the fourth quarter, that was awesome. And that was lacking last year. So in a way, I'll trade the highly explosive plays where Ohio State felt like they had to score 50 just to keep themselves in a game over methodically driving down the field, a 7-minute drive to just punch it in Notre Dame's teeth to get that victory. I'll take that trade-off. Even if maybe it's not as pretty, maybe it's not what folks were expecting, but at the end of the day, it's a double-digit win at home to start the season, and I'll take it.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I think it is funny that it was Tressel was there, and I felt like we were playing more Tressel ball than I think we have played since before Urban was there, right?
Yeah.
And what I loved about Mayan Williams is Mayan Williams looked at the whole world and said, look, you all think Travian Henderson's the guy here. And rightfully so, Travion's the guy. But I'll tell you, there will be a Browns-type running back field this year. You're going to see Mayan Williams carry it 15 to 16 times. You're going to see Travian Henderson carry it 15 times, catch a couple balls. That is what's going to be the recipe, I think, for continued success, especially as you get into Big Ten play. But one thing I did want to bring up was Cade Stover. There was anybody on this offense that showed me something that I did not expect, right? We all wanted Cade Stover to go to linebacker, right? Because of how bad the linebackers were last year. We said, just stay at linebacker. But I think what this did was, one, I think Cade put the confidence into the linebackers we have and said, hey, I'm going to go back to offense. And two, I think Jim Knowles was like, no, like, I have my guys, let's do it. But Cade Stover made some catches that I was like, this dude was a defensive end when he came. And a linebacker, and he's going out making some ridiculous plays, and he's physical. Him and Mitch Rossi are like my two favorite guys right now on this offense, just like the no-name guys, but are just going to go out and play football. But one thing I will say that, you talk about the positive thing. One thing that did struggle with me is the amount of times I saw CJ Stroud and the amount of open space he had to run. And he would force a throw. It'd be incomplete, but I'm going, this is the same Stroud that we saw last year that I was frustrated about, because I get it. He wants to be a very great passer, and I'm all for it. But we're in the modern age of football, and he has the legs to do it. We saw him his freshman year run a ball 55 yards for a touchdown. He has the ability to do it. I don't know if it's just his nerves when he gets that last 10-second mark where we talk about you need to get rid of the ball. But I'm like, dude, you had 20 yards of space on your left and you refused to use it. And it's like, teams know this. That's why they're putting the double high safety. That's why they're not really having a spy on him, because like once he gets the line of scrimmage, he's going to release the ball. So for me, I'm really interested to see how he will develop. I think these next two games, if you're Ryan Day, this is just my thoughts, right? As someone who helped with the quarterbacks and stuff when I was coaching, one of the things I think Ryan Day's got to do is say, hey, look, CJ, you have to carry the ball at least 5 times, like on a scramble, something. Get down, but you have to get used to, before you start getting drilled by Big Ten linebackers, get used to running the ball, because I think that could add a weapon to this offense that could be dangerous. You have Travian, you have Stroud that can run as well. But this offensive line, I'll be honest, outside of what's his face? Left tackle, big man. Forget his name now. 6'8". What's his name? He's slipping my head now.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank too, but
Jones? No, it's not Jones. Anyways, I was not going to talk about him because he had a lot of false starts this week. But I'll tell you, Johnson looked like a all-pro tackle. Truly, he did not make many mistakes. He truly looked like a guy that's going to get drafted in the first round next year. Now, I would say out of everything I'm worried about in the offense is who is stepping up receiver-wise, right? Like Smith-Njigba is not going to be, and that's why I love about it. Okay, I hate to say I love that he's injured, but the reason I like that he's going to be out is that this is going to give time for Stroud to go, okay, I like you, and you, and you. You are going to be my guys for this next week. My question to you, Aaron, is what do you think about this wide receiver room? Do you think you saw enough from these guys this past week, or do you think you're still got a lot of questions on what's going to happen in that room?
I was impressed with what I saw for a lot of guys seeing actual game experience for the first time against, again, I think a pretty good Notre Dame secondary and just overall defense. So, I mean, I was impressed. Like Xavier Johnson
Oh, I love
basically
that story.
hadn't played really anything outside of special teams, and then catches a critical touchdown, which is essentially the game winner for Ohio State, or ended up being. I'm not worried about the wide receivers at all. There's so much talent there, and Brian Hartline has more than proved his ability to not only recruit the top wide receivers in the country, but to develop them into
and keep them
NFL talent. I mean, there's so many players I could list that honestly didn't even make a ton of plays. Like, I mean, there's no, to me, yes, it's, I don't want to overstate just losing a couple first round wide receivers, but if there's any team that can reload at that position, it's Ohio State. If you will let me, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit about CJ Stroud running the ball. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but here's something to consider. What's the trade-off of him running and him taking extra hits? Because I think about Justin Fields in the 2019 playoff against Clemson. He was banged up, had a bum knee. A year later, gets that shot right to the ribs from Skalski from Clemson, targeting. We know how that goes, and obviously toughed it out, won that game against Clemson, but was slowed down a little bit by that. Is there a trade-off to just saying, Stroud, yeah, there could be a first down or two here and there that you probably could have picked up with your legs? I think everyone saw that watching that game. But is that worth the trade-off of taking those hits, of risking injury? I don't know. Yeah, it's the same story from last year, but he also wasn't really hurt last year outside of a shoulder injury that didn't really have anything to do with him running the ball. So, and that was early in the season as well.
Yeah,
I think just something to think about. That, yeah, would I like to see him pick up 10 yards when there's 10 yards wide open in front of him? Yeah, and maybe we can get to a point where he gets the obvious 10 yards and slides down and doesn't take a hit. But I also think that he's going to have the weapons around him that, like last year, and when Ohio State had the best offense in the country, he's not really going to need to run the ball, hardly ever.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that, right? Like taking those hits, it did remind me of when you said Justin Fields. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those hits that he took. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were pretty vicious. But I will say I think for me, it's more when Stroud has literally 20 yards of no one around. Yeah. That's what drives me nuts. I'm not saying, hey, let's run read options 15 times. I don't want that. Yeah. What I do want is like for him not to be like, okay, I'm going to force this, because what happened last year when he made those stupid mistakes, he forced it. It was never like he just tried to force something that wasn't there. And that's, as a quarterback, we all know, what does Tom Brady do the best at? Aaron Rodgers. They don't force it when it's not there, right? They pick their chances or whatever. But no, I agree with you. The one thing I would say about the wide receivers that did worry me a little bit is we saw Ibuka to me had one of the best games all night. I mean, he's just a freak. I'm sorry. Like watching him was just like, this dude's amazing. I was a little shocked at Harrison. He just didn't seem like the same guy that we had been getting hyped up all summer on, the same guy that we saw in the Rose Bowl. And I know this is early, and again, I've got to keep this kind of, mellowed down a little bit. But I would just like to see at least one of these guys during these next two games just get 150 yards, right? Get that confidence boosting, because when we play the Wisconsins, the Penn States, the Michigan States, the Michigans, it's going to be a reliability. Who can be reliable? And I think that's be an interesting thing. I believe that Xavier Johnson should be starting these next couple of games, but that's just my opinion. But no, my question for you is, what did you think about, we've been hearing a lot of criticism the last few days about the play calling of Ryan Day. What were your thoughts on his play calling early on versus later in the game?
I think there was probably a little bit of criticism because in that first half, it felt like Ohio State just was not opening it up at all.
Yeah.
And I understand those criticisms, but again, I kind of point to that second half where you basically just ran the ball down Notre Dame's throat and just dominated the line of scrimmage. I think if anything, that was Ryan Day proving to his team, hey, we can be multifaceted on offense. Yep. Yes, we're going to have probably one of the best passing attacks in the country again. But by the way, and maybe it's sending a message to other opponents that are coming later in the schedule. Yeah, when the time comes, we're gonna smash it up the middle, because that was a weakness. What happened when they couldn't run the ball effectively against Michigan? It was CJ Stroud running around for his life with Aiden Hutchinson bearing down on him, and Michigan kind of knew what Ohio State's offense was going to do. And look, it wasn't the prettiest thing, But I think I'm looking kind of long term. I think this could be a good thing if Ohio State has multiple layers to their offense. And I'm talking like we weren't good at running the ball last year. I mean, Henderson had 1,300 plus rushing yards. Like this,
but it wasn't consistent though. We didn't go to it consistently.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not worried about it. I think it was fine. Ohio State's the only thing that does scare me is Ohio State's such a second half team.
Yes, I know.
I wish they would just I would have just preferred them 14-21 nothing Notre Dame see it by in the first half.
Exactly.
And that's not the way it went. But
it gives us heart attacks.
The funny thing is Jim Knowles is also that way because the national average, if you look across college football, a defense gives up approximately the same number of points in the first half that they do in the second half. That's just the college football national average. Jim Knowles, historically at Oklahoma State the last 2 seasons, allowed 4 points less in the second half. So he too, also, and you saw that again in the Notre Dame game, 10 points for Notre Dame in the first half, 0 in the second half with 80 yards allowed. So that was also true. And I think that's overall a good thing. The fact that Ohio State's going to be one of the best teams and making those halftime adjustments. I just rather see them not be down at halftime, but that's me nitpicking a little bit.
Of course.
That's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I wish they would be more of a first half team. I think we all do because our hearts cannot handle much more Ryan Day. Okay. As I know you're watching this and obviously you're listening to me say anything. But I do want to get before we go to the defense, I want to get your offensive player of the games. Do you have a couple guys that you say, hey, these were my offensive player of the games for you?
I thought Mayan Williams, obviously that last drive. But what jumped off the page to me was not only his great drive, but he looks so much slimmer. Like it was obvious. And by no means is he a small running back. Like he is still running people over. So I thought his last drive where he just punched it into the end zone at the end. And by the way, waved off Travian Henderson, who was great. In for him when it was first and goal from the 5. Williams said, no, I've done the work to get us here. I'm going to finish it. Love to see that. Even, I'm sure Henderson and Williams are just fine. I don't think there's any chemistry issues there with that at all. But and I know that's perhaps an obvious pick, but I just love the play of Williams, especially at the end. That just felt good because that part of our game had been missing. It felt like, so that's my offensive MVP, I guess, if I had to give one.
See, this was tough for me, right? I could go to running backs. I could go to the wide receivers, Buka or whatever, but I'm going to go offensive line as a whole. That is my MVP for the offensive players of the game, I guess, for me.
Yeah.
I just think the offensive line this is the best offensive line we've seen in a few years, I think, at least for the first game, right? Like last year, remember the Oregon game? It was like our guys could barely, we were afraid to touch people. We played 4 tackles last year. Thank goodness we got out of this 4 tackle system because I'm sorry, Johnson should not be playing inside. I'm sorry. He's not a guard. He's so much better as a tackle. But I'm super excited to see this offensive line. So that'd be and I think my runner up would then be Mayan Williams. Mayan Williams, watching him run, they call him whatever. He's a bowling ball. Okay. That's what he is. He literally would run guys over and then he smiles every time he gets up. It's like he enjoys getting drilled. He loves that. And that's what I think is amazing. But yeah, so that's who I got on the offensive side of the ball. Now we're going to talk about defense. And Aaron, I think this is our favorite part because we're just happy. Finally, we have a defense like when we grew up and we watched the AJ Hawks of the world. It's amazing to watch. They gave up 10 points to the number 5 team. Okay. I just want to repeat that for all of you listening. They gave up 10 points to the number 5 team. This is very similar to a game last year involving Georgia and Clemson. And if you remember who won that game, it was Georgia. I'm just going to leave that out there. You can interpret that how it may be. But Aaron, what were your thoughts on this defense? Were you shocked at all of how well this defense played?
I was. And again, it's one of those things that how much am I overreacting to what I saw in one singular game with no reference to how Notre Dame will do the rest of the season? But it was, I think regardless, it was noticeably different. Jim Knowles looks like, and I think we kind of saw this coming, but might be the actual best hire of the offseason. And I know there was all sorts of potential for that to be true. So far through week 1, it's good. By the way, if you check over at Stillwater, I know it was in garbage time, but Oklahoma State gave up 40 plus points to Central Michigan. I know. And I know 30 of those dollars were in garbage time, but doesn't it make you wonder, wow, I think Jim Knowles was truly such an important piece of that Oklahoma State team, a team that historically prior to his arrival was just horrible on defense. And that's what kept them from really achieving anything. Now that he's there, they finally beat Oklahoma. They were an inch away from a Big 12 championship, an inch away from a college football playoff. And now Ohio State welcomes him in. So overall, just vast improvements. They seemed more physical. They seemed faster, just all around, I thought, improvement. And I think you said it in the beginning. It seemed like a relatively simplistic concept. And I think that's good because a lot of the criticism of previous Ohio State defenses was that the system was just too complicated. Guys were having a hard time remembering where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do, instead of just going out there and hitting people. And I think that's what they're going to do in Jim Knowles' defense. As far as my MVP, I've got to give it to Michael Hall. I thought he was tremendous. The tackle just
unreal.
And I know, like, looking at his stat sheet, he only had like 4 tackles technically, but he just filled up the middle.
He just
every time
blew up everything.
Yeah, blew up everything. Running was virtually impossible against Ohio State on Saturday. He did have a big sack as well. So Michael Hall, that was really cool. He had a heck of a game, and I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the season.
Yeah, I was so excited about this defense, man. It made me excited to watch Ohio State football again. Even when we were losing, I was like, even if we lose this game, the fact that our defense is only giving up 10 points is just like awesome to me, right? And I think Jim Knowles, one thing that I think was very interesting, and I don't know if you realize this, was Josh Proctor got pulled after the first series.
Yeah.
Right. Because he missed a tackle and Jim Knowles went, yeah, not on my defense. And I think what that showed was, Josh Proctor was very upset. But I think that what that shows is that Jim Knowles is not here to do what we did last year and miss a ton of tackles, right? Like, look, Clemson game last night, they missed a ton of tackles. I think this Ohio State defense is I think fundamentally they're sound. They might give up some big plays here and there, but everyone will. That's just a common thing unless you're Georgia and you're just a freak of nature and you have superhumans. But I think with Ohio State, what you did notice is I think the 3 safety thing, which I was very concerned about. I was like, we're only doing 2 linebackers. Eichenberg made it look like he was like all 3 linebackers in one. And what I did love, I don't know if you saw the sack Eichenberg had, I believe it was his first sack, where they shifted to the left or to the right. So the defense is right. And then he kind of snuck with them and then countered his way back through in an open gap. What that shows me is that it's not just a very simple blitz packages like they used to do. Ohio State used to just do these simple, send the guy, that's it. This time it's thought through. How are we going to do it? Disguising it. And for my MVP, it was very tough, but I'm going with Tommy Eichenberg because this is the first linebacker we've had, Aaron. When's the last linebacker you've been able to be like proud about at Ohio State? Honestly, truly.
Been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I miss having these, having this linebacker that's just rough, tough, and it's just going to hit somebody. And I think it's just going to be very interesting to see how this defense goes. I'll be honest with you. I heard it on a podcast the other day, and I agree with them. I believe the best cornerback right now on the roster is not Burke. It's Cameron Brown. If you watch Cameron Brown play this game, he went against tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, and played a heck of a game. Burke did too, but I mean, you just watch Cameron Brown play, and I think he's back to being fully healthy. And I think that's good for all Ohio State football. But my question for you, Aaron, is with this defense, we talked about our MVPs and what that means to you. What do you think, which group of the Ohio State defense was the most impressive to you during this game?
There's a lot to choose from. I'd probably say the running back duo of Henderson and Williams. And I know Henderson didn't have his typical game. Well, I say that I'm looking at the stat sheet. He had 15 attempts, 91 yards, and average 6. I mean, it's got to be the running backs. Now that I'm taking a closer look, I mean, he had 6 yards a carry. Mayan Williams added 14 carries, 84 yards, a touchdown. So especially considering how physical that game was, I was very impressed with the running backs and with the offensive line. You said it. The Ohio State offensive line basically ran kind of a 4-tackle formation just by nature of who was in that unit last year. We're, for the most part, keeping CJ Stroud upright, but as far as running the ball, that got them into tricky situations. They're a little bit more balanced this year, as you mentioned, and I think that's going to open up some more running holes, some more lanes for those running backs to do some damage. So maybe a combination between the running backs and the offensive line, because don't want to slight the big guys up front.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the running back group was probably I would also put out there the cornerbacks, the DBs. I think the DBs played, the safeties included. Like, we gave up only a few big plays, and that was mainly because of like stupid blitzes, like the corner blitz on the first play. Like, okay, Jim.
Well, and even the first play was almost an interception.
I know.
Like,
I know.
I didn't hate it because it was aggressive. I'm like, well, you gave up a big play, but I like how aggressive we came out against a quarterback that hadn't really played a ton of time at Notre Dame.
Now, I know we don't talk about special teams a lot on here, Aaron. I think either of our podcasts we don't, but Ruggles, I'm very disappointed in you. You missed one field goal all year and you missed one already.
Yeah.
It's getting really ridiculous right now. No, but I think Jesse Mirko, he had a heck of a game punting the ball. I mean, how many times did we pin Notre Dame down within the 15, 20? It was ridiculous. And
you know what they say, punting is winning. Or at least that's what they say at Iowa.
That's what Pat McAfee says.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so it's very interesting. So Aaron, take a chance now after the game, after we've talked about it. How do you feel about this Ohio State team? You know, they dropped in the rankings this week, but it was Georgia, and Georgia beat an Oregon team that really shouldn't have been ranked that high, but we won't talk about that. But how do you feel after this game? Do you feel like this Ohio State team can still make a run to the national title? Do you still feel like this team's really got it?
Yeah. I thought it was good overall. Not a fast start by any stretch of the imagination, but they gutted out a tough win against a tough opponent to start the year. I feel fine. They've got, as I mentioned, they've got a couple tune-up games against Arkansas State, Toledo before they welcome Wisconsin into the shoe to kick off the Big Ten season. So I think they're on the short list of 3 teams that have an actual chance at a national championship this year. Maybe Michigan gets added to that list. Time will tell, because Michigan, their non-conference schedule is kind of a joke. I think Michigan's got a shot, so maybe I'll add them to the equation there. But yeah, I feel fine. I'm not worried. I mean, those 2 weeks will be nice tune-ups. Hopefully, get some of the young receivers in the loop. Yeah, just shore up that defense even more and
get a quarterback in there.
Yeah. I think we'll be good. So I still feel really good. That was overall a good victory. Everyone in the national media that's poo-pooing Ohio State for that performance and saying, well, Georgia, it's just Georgia, Alabama. I disagree. I think Ohio State's going to be right there in the mix, and they've got the talent on both sides of the ball this year to do the trick to get there. And I've got Ohio State in my national championship.
Same.
I think it'll be Alabama, Ohio State as a repeat of 2020's game.
I'll be honest, Georgia played Oregon. That was not that good. So that before anybody says that, but no, I agree with you on all what you said there. I really do. Now to kind of move on before we go to our power rankings and Heisman watch for week 2. By the way, we just, so everyone knows, we're not picking Arkansas State to win this week. Okay. We're not even going to go there. Okay. It's going to be a win. Butch Jones thinks that they're going to come in and beat us, but okay, Butch Jones. Yeah, you can do that. But college football recap. We got a few games, the Oregon, Georgia game, Florida, Utah. Josh is a big Florida fan. Sorry, Josh. I know that you're here. You do wish you could talk about it, but, and then Arkansas.
Heck of a win for Florida this week.
Heck of a win. What is a game out of this group of games? Maybe there's another game that you wanted to bring up that you wanted to talk about, but is there anything that caught your eye this weekend that you really want to highlight?
Yeah, I'll just say that was a tremendous win for Florida.
Yeah.
First year coach Billy Napier, it seems like it's a huge difference for them. Like, I don't think they cared for Dan Mullen. I think that became obvious at the end of the season. If you beat Alabama last year, that's a whole different script. You could probably tolerate the guy. I know there's nothing wrong with Dan Mullen, but I think hearing things from the offseason and seeing how they played for Napier on Saturday, I think this could be a very interesting team. Now, I think Georgia is still clearly the favorite to win in the East, and Florida themselves faces a tough matchup against Kentucky this week. It's at Florida, but I expect that to be a tough game. But Anthony Richardson is going to be in almost every week the most dangerous and talented player on the field, probably other than the weeks they played Georgia and I can't remember who they pull out of the West, maybe just against their game against Georgia. So he's got all kinds of potential. It again makes you question why Dan Mullen insisted on going with Emory Jones those couple last years with the Gators. But anyways, So, but good win. Utah, I had them in my playoff. That could still happen. That didn't take them out of the playoff race. It just means it's a really, really tough stretch that Utah must face early in the season. They still play UCLA, USC here in the next few weeks. So I don't think Utah gets there, but I'll give them a ton of credit for going to Florida, playing that game first week of the year. That is a tough place to play. I'll give credit to Florida for going to Salt Lake City next year. I'm thrilled that we had a home and home, because enough of these stupid neutral site games. Like, what is the point of playing a game in Atlanta when Georgia Tech's home campus and their stadium is 8 miles away? That is, what are we doing? Or even like Georgia and Oregon, like Oregon goes all the way down and plays that game in Atlanta. They're not going to Portland and playing a neutral site game there. Like, what are we doing? Just play a home and home. I know it's because Georgia doesn't want to go to Oregon next year. Just get over yourselves. But I will say, Georgia, I know that's probably not going to be a good Oregon team, and they were not well prepared from a coaching standpoint. But my goodness, Georgia did look really good. They will have, at the end of the season, we will look back at the Bulldogs team this year and say, wow, this is the greatest tight end room ever assembled on a college football team, ever. Like they are that good. And Stetson Bennett made some incredible plays. So as good as the Georgia defense was last year, they'll still be good enough. And the offense looks like it could be improved from last year. So Georgia will certainly be in the mix, even though they lost a record 15 players to the NFL draft. That had never happened in the modern era. You had 5 players from that defense going in the first round alone. But it's at this point, Kirby Smart, he's got that wheel turning. They're just in reload mode. They're full Alabama model. It's like, who cares who you lose? They're reloading. They'll be right in the mix again.
You know, it is fascinating, Aaron, because I just want to point out that Josh is a Florida fan, right? Like I said, you know who he picked against this game on Saturday? You know who he picked
Utah to win?
Oh, he picked Utah to beat his own team. So he told me not to give him a hard time, but Josh, who are you talking to? Josh, what are you doing? What are you doing?
I mean,
man?
I picked Utah. I mean, they're in my playoff.
I
thought it would be close.
No, I did too. But the issue is that he's a Florida fan. Like, that's the thing, right?
You know what? I respect him being realistic of his team.
I think he's just been so demoralized over the last few years that he's just, but I will say about AR-15, Anthony Richardson, I don't know if I'm allowed to say AR-15 on the podcast anymore, but Anthony Richardson, the one thing I think was interesting is just how much he's improved. And I think Josh will say that, I think next week when we talk to him, he'll say the same thing. But, I had Utah in my top 5 for my power rankings week 1. And I really believe in Utah. I think they earn my respect from the Rose Bowl and everything like that. And I go to that Florida team and I'm like, Dan Mullen hated, I think, his job. Like, it just looked like it. And Napier comes in, it's like a brand new team, a brand new place. And I'm really excited to see what Florida does. I think a good Florida, as I'm sure you'll agree with me, a good Florida means good college football, right? Some of these teams that need to come back on the top here. Now, speaking of that Georgia-Oregon game, I'm sorry. Why was Oregon ranked 11? I will never, in my mind, understand how that team was ranked 11. Bo Nix, seems like everywhere he goes, it's just like a nightmare. But I will agree with you. I need to publicly apologize to Stetson Bennett. I've said multiple times on this podcast that I think he was a very bad quarterback. Obviously, you came out to prove people wrong because he came out and did something that I didn't think he could do. And I think Georgia is going to be a team that I don't know if they have enough to win it all. I don't even know if they have enough to make it to the championship game. They have enough to make it to the playoffs, I believe. But their offense still always worries me because they haven't faced the Oregon defense until they face an Alabama defense. Now this new look Ohio State defense, that's when we'll truly know about a Georgia. And I think Alabama even looked really strong this weekend. Bryce Young looked like Bryce Young. I don't think he's winning the Heisman this year. I don't think we'll see another 2-time winner. I just think it's more political that way. I don't know why, but that's what I feel like. Alabama looked good. USC scored 3 defensive interception touchdowns, which was not what I think Riley wanted in his first. I think he was wanting to, rack up the score in the other way. But no, overall, it was a great week of football. And I want to get your thoughts on Georgia, Oregon for a second. Do you feel like, Aaron, that we should have more games like Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Florida, Utah? Like, I feel like some of these big teams are too scared to schedule these. As much as we give Notre Dame, bad rap for not being in a conference, they will schedule tough games, and I'll give them credit to that. But we don't see Clemson doing this. We don't see Michigan doing this. We don't see these other teams doing this. Do you think this should be a big weight on your college football playoff chances? Because I feel like they say it is, but I don't feel like it truly is and what it should be.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation to have because there's layers to this. The first layer is that this game between Ohio State and Notre Dame, or this game between Georgia and Oregon, got scheduled probably 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's also that's just the weird and almost unfortunate way that college football games get scheduled. Who knows? Michigan, give them credit. They scheduled Washington last year. It just happened that Washington was horrible. But 10 years ago, or whenever that game got scheduled, Washington was maybe fresh off of a college football playoff appearance.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part. You don't know. And I think in a world where everyone is laser focused on, can this team get to the college football playoff? I'm certainly guilty of that, because that's an interesting conversation I have. There is more to a successful season than just a playoff. And as the playoff expands, I think hopefully we will see more of these kinds of games, because then if there's an expanded playoff, spoiler alert, the regular season doesn't matter as much, which is a reason why we should not expand the playoff, but it's going to happen. So might as well deal with it. But let's schedule some of these games then, because, hey, it doesn't matter if Notre Dame loses in 5 years when there's a 12-team playoff, because they're probably getting in anyways. So let's have more of those games moving forward. I love it. Like Utah, Florida, again, I give so much props to both of those schools for putting that game together. I give Utah a ton of credit to going to the swamp, to playing in that tough environment. And I'll give Florida all kinds of credit next year for going to Salt Lake City, which is in its own unique way, a very difficult place to play as well. So I personally love it. I give so much credit to the teams that are making this happen. But it's a catch-22, because now if you're Notre Dame, you've got first-year full-time head coach Marcus Freeman, and he's got an 0-1 record staring him in the face, and he's probably going to have to run the table just to get to the college football playoff. Is that fair because you went to the road? Well, yeah, that's a separate discussion then. Yeah, I agree. Notre Dame, get your butt in a conference. But is it fair that Notre Dame has to run the table now after going to the number 2 team in the nation and losing and looking okay, only losing by 11? Is that fair? Probably not, but I'd argue college football is really never fair. And that's part of the frustration, and also kind of part of the beauty of the sport that we love so much.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm all for it too. I wish Ohio State would schedule like all their non-conference. I mean, we know we need to have some patsy games in there, but I would love to see them schedule like 2 straight back-to-back tough games. But again, I think if you don't know, the playoff is expanding, and I hate it 100%. Yes, I think it's going to make the Michigan Ohio State game not to us Ohio State fans or Michigan fans, but it's going to make it less meaningful. It's going to make conference titles probably less meaningful. And I said this on last week's podcast, and I'll say it again. And I want Aaron, I want you to touch on this. We grew up with college football. We grew up waking up on a Saturday morning after your Friday night football game. You went to your high school. You woke up on Saturday morning. You watched College Game Day. Then you sat down. You watched a bunch of games, like Aaron did yesterday on Saturday.
Yes,
I am scared, Aaron, that we are losing what college football is, and it's becoming the NFL. And we all know how many people hate the NFL now. My fear is that we will never really truly get back what college football was for many of us. The reason we fell in love with the game, the reason why I really met some of my best friends, was because of football. Do you feel like the same way? Do you feel like this is a scary road that we are going towards, that's leading more towards a professional sport rather than a more collegiate, like feeling like a small town sport?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I would agree. And I like the NFL, but I love college football.
Yeah.
I think that's where I draw the line. They're 2 completely different things. I think about this. The 2 driving forces for this expanded playoff, the biggest one, the elephant in the room, is the billions of dollars that teams and schools are bringing in. So from that perspective, you've seen this coming. So it's not a complete shock. So that's helped me kind of at least prepare my mind for what that looks like, and all the changes that we're going to see in college football. But the second aspect of this is, I think a majority of, let me put it this way, and I can't remember where I heard this from, so I would give credit if I could, but it's not all expansionists are casuals, but all casual fans are expansionists, meaning that if you're a casual fan of college football, there's a likely chance that you're more familiar with the NFL system of, 12 teams getting in the playoffs, or 14 or whatever it is now. And I just have to remind people, college football is a different sport. We are doing it a disservice by comparing it to the NFL and saying, well, if the NFL has 12 playoff teams for 32 teams overall in the league, how in the world is college football functioning with a 4-team playoff for 131 FBS teams? And the reason is twofold. Number one, there is usually no more than 2 teams that can actually win a national title in any given year. There are rare instances where there's more than 2, but usually there's only 1 or 2. Last year was a perfect example. where it was Alabama, Georgia, well above everybody else. And again, I'll remind people that there's been more years like that than there have been years where the fifth team has the actual fighting chance to win a national title. I'd say 2014 TCU, I'd say 2015 Ohio State. Those might be the only two examples.
Yeah.
The second part of this is the college football playoff is a 131 team playoff already. You know why? Because we play the playoff in the year. When Michigan played Michigan State in October last year, in one of the best games of the year, Michigan State's win over Michigan meant something. When I went to the Big House in November and sat through what for me as an Ohio State fan was an extremely disheartening game where Ohio State finally lost to Michigan. Not only did it hurt because we lost to Michigan, not only did it hurt because we failed to win the Big Ten East and reach a Big Ten championship, it also hurt because we lost a playoff opportunity. But you know why? But after the game, I wasn't like, well, you know what? If only there was an 8-team playoff or a 12-team playoff, we'd still be fighting for something.
No,
I said to myself, you know what? What just got played right there? That was a quarterfinal game because it was a Michigan that ended up in the playoff instead of Ohio State. And I think people fail to realize that we have a playoff. It's already there. It's just built in the regular season. Is it fair? No. College, again, I go back to the fact that college football isn't fair, but some of the chaos and just ridiculous things that happen are because college football is not fair. Cincinnati reaching the playoff, going undefeated, and finally reaching the playoff. Why was that such a good story? Because they went undefeated the prior season and didn't get in. They had to go to the Peach Bowl and compete very well against the Georgia team that obviously won the national championship the year after. And that was their ticket. Their ticket was they had to go undefeated 2 seasons in a row. Is that fair? No, but did it make for a better storyline and did it make college football better? I'd argue yes. So I don't understand the need for playoff expansion if the thought is more teams are deserving. If more teams were deserving, then they would win more games in the regular season in those big matchups and they'd get there. You're going to see less diversity of championship winners in an expanded playoff in a system where, by the way, Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Georgia get there every single season. And they're already the better equipped teams to win the championship. And they will without fail. Now that even in the one random year where Alabama doesn't make it in the playoff, because they've made it in all the others so far, they're in it in a 12-team system. So I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I said this on our podcast and I ranted there. So I'll cut it here. But I think in 10 years, to really answer your question, I do think in 10 years, we're going to look back and say, I wonder if we really needed this 12-team system. And the answer will be, no, we didn't. But at that point, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. It's not going back. This is the college football of the future. I understand maybe expansion if we get to these 20-team mega conferences where, yeah, maybe you have 4 teams in one conference that has a legitimate shot at the playoff. Then I could see expansion to 8. But why did we jump from 4 to 12? Like, there's so many reasons why this is bad. And I could probably talk about it forever. I need to stop. So I don't take over your show. But
no, I will say, Aaron, that was the best stated. Like, I think that was the best way to put it. And I couldn't say it any better myself. I've had the same, Josh and I have said the same thing over and over again. We've said very similar things to you. We said, this has become about money, and I get it. You want to pay players. That's fine. They deserve that. We've had this conversation, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you take away the basis of what the game is. You don't change what that is just to make you more money. That's a whole nother story for another day. But with that, let's shift to the final part of the show this week. And that is power rankings and our Heisman watch list for week 2. If you guys don't know, head on over to our Instagram at baseline.podcast, where we're posting weekly our power rankings and our Heisman watch list. So, Aaron, we are going to hit the power rankings. I will start with my top 5, and I'll kind of break it down as I go through here. So after week 1, I'll go ahead and state mine if no one knows that's listening, or since Aaron, I don't know if you remember what mine were, but my week 1 was at 1 Ohio State, at 2 Alabama, 3 was Georgia, 4 was USC, and 5 was Utah. Obviously, a few things are changing within this. Right now, for my week 2 power rankings, right now I currently have Georgia at 1. I have Ohio State at 2. I have Alabama at 3. I have USC still at 4, but the 5th spot, And I could have went many ways with this because could have went Michigan, but I felt like I'd be sinning if I put them in the top 5 of power rankings. But no, in my top 5, the final thing I was gonna thought about put Florida. Who would I put? No, I decided to put this is hard to say. I decided to put Clemson mainly because I really honestly I haven't really seen a team that has stuck out with me quite yet. And they're already up there in the rankings anyways. So those are my top 5. One of the biggest things, the reasons why I jumped Georgia up was just because of their dominant win. I think they showed that. I think Alabama, I mean, it was Utah State. Like, I can't really judge you on that yet. And I think Ohio State deserved to be in the top 2 still for their win, and somewhat like that. So those are my top 5. I have Clemson at 5. I'm about to get ridiculed in the comments because honestly, and that might change by the end of you talking about your top 5. Maybe you can convince me not to put Clemson. But Aaron, I want to hear your top 5 power rankings for week 2.
I mean, I know it was in backup, like garbage time, but when Cade Klubnik took over at quarterback, I mean, there was just a jump. Like he looked so quick, the offense looked completely different. I think he's probably the starter at some point.
Yeah.
Which in my mind, with that defense, with the Clemson defense, if he's as good as advertised and will finally be given the reins, then Clemson's absolutely capable of being a top 5 team. So I can't disagree. Not a great showing for them, but they did turn around in the second half, but that's a bad Georgia Tech team. So I'm not rating too much into it. So my power rankings, obviously I didn't really give you any preseason power rankings at all, but I'll just say that Utah was the team that kind of fell out of my power rankings. I think that they're still in the top 10, but my order goes as follows. The top 3 is unchanged for me. Actually, really the top 4. It's Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. I've got Michigan at 4.
Okay.
I think Michigan is right there. Again, they're going to have a tough time proving that they're right there because of the opponents they play. They play Colorado State, they play UConn, they play Hawaii. Truly 3 of the worst FBS schools of the 131 FBS schools. So it'll be a tough sense to get a hold on them until they play at Iowa the last week of September. So that would be quite something. Speaking of Iowa, oh my gosh. At number 5, I agree. There's a bit of a void there. I'm going Oklahoma. I've got Oklahoma in my playoff. I feel like this is a team that people are overlooking just because Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams left for USC, but Oklahoma is going to have a good offense again, their usual offense. But I just assume Brent Venables just simply being on the sideline in Oklahoma just automatically improves that defense, which has held them back from really competing in the playoff when they've gotten there. And Riley got them there 3 of his 5 years. So I'm big on Oklahoma this year. I think the Big 12's down. Baylor's not going to be as good as last year. I think there's a chance Oklahoma State's not as good as last year. Texas, while they'll be improved, is not back. Texas is not back. I repeat, you will find that out when they lose to 30 against Alabama this week. They are not back. It's Oklahoma's conference, in my opinion. So I really like Dylan Gabriel. He's got his offensive coordinator back, and Levy, who was there with UCF in 2019. That was Gabriel's best season. So I'm big on the Sooners. They're in my number 5 spot.
So would you say who's right on the outside at 6 and let's say 6 and 7? Would you say Clemson's right there? Would you say maybe Florida, Utah? Are they right in that? Notre Dame? Would you say they're in that close to that 5 spot?
This is a bit of a hot take. I'll throw Miami maybe on the edge. And this is a little fuzzy because I think Notre Dame's got a chance to stick around. I really like Marcus Freeman. I think he'll be great. But I'll throw Miami in there because look, someone's going to have to win the ACC for similar reasons why you've got Clemson there. I think Miami's capable. They do play Clemson this year. NC State, I think, could be good this year. Obviously, that was not a pretty game at East Carolina where they almost and probably should have lost, but someone from the ACC's got to do something. And maybe it's Miami with Mario Cristobal. They did look, I know it was Bethune-Cookman, so I'm not trying to overreact. But they did look good. And I've got to put somebody there. I don't feel comfortable putting Clemson. I think Clemson goes 10-2 this year. So for some clicks, I'll throw Miami at the number 6 spot.
I'll tell you, our guest that had the guest picker for last week, he was very NC State, and he got ridiculed all over our Instagram. So I think that
I'll
you
say
made a right
this. Speaking of ridicule, we posted our college football playoff, and myself and Johnny, we had Utah, and Josh picked Oregon. And wow, people found that on Facebook. My goodness. Whew. I mean, we deserve it. We picked it, so I'm standing by it. But
hey,
wow,
you stand by it. That's why I don't put those predictions out. Usually I just talk about them. But yeah, so that's our power rankings. I would also say on that, I think that Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia will not change for me for the rest of the year. I think the 4 and 5 will change with me all year. 1 through 3 will stay the same. And I do believe in USC. I do believe that they will win the Pac-12. I think it's not even going to be close.
And at this point, aren't they the only Pac-12's playoff hope? Probably already, just 1 week into the
Utah,
season.
maybe has a chance. But now let's focus on our Heisman watch list. I didn't go over Josh's from last week. Let me go over that real quick. Josh last week had, just so you know, Aaron, he had Ohio State 1, Alabama 2, Georgia 3, Utah 4, and he had Notre Dame at 5. Okay. So his is pretty much the same. I'm guessing he's going to change a few. But now we're going to talk about Heisman. For me, Heisman for me was last week was CJ Stroud 1, Bryce Young 2, Travian Henderson 3, Hendon Hooker 4, and then Devin Leary from NC State was 5. And last week, Josh had CJ Stroud 1, he had Bryce Young 2, he had Hendon Hooker 3, Devin Leary 4, and then he had a surprise pick that really ticked off a lot of people in many places, which he had Blake Corum at 5. Don't ask me why. And so that was a very interesting pick. But I'll let you go first this time. What do you have for your Heisman watch list for week 2?
I respect the Blake Corum pick. I like that. He's going to be a good running back this year. He'll be one of the best in the country. So, look. So I don't know if you guys are picking based on who you think is going to win or who should win.
Kind of a combination of both. So it's not really like we're trying to be logical, but then also like, okay, most likely Bryce Young's not going to win it, but we're at least going to put him, should win it. So he should be up there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, knowing that, since I'm a guest, I feel like I have a little bit more liberty than if I have to defend myself every week. So I'm going to say that this is just a wild concept. I'm going to say the best player in college football should win the Heisman Trophy. The best player in college football is Will Anderson from Alabama. So I'm going to put Will Anderson at 1. I am going to put CJ Stroud at 2. I think he is the eventual winner as long as Ohio State takes care of business. I'll put Bryce Young 3rd. I'll put Caleb Williams 4th. And then I kind of feel the same about, wow, that was quite the reaction.
Yeah, Caleb Williams is not a very popular pick on this show. So I feel like he still needs to prove himself just a little bit more.
I absolutely agree. That's all to do with the potential that he's got and the chances USC will have to win some games on national television against a conference that doesn't appear like it will be very strong. 5th, there's a whole bunch of different directions I could go. I feel similarly to the Heisman as I do to the power rankings, where the top 4 seem pretty set to me. 5th is kind of up in the air. I'll throw like, can I throw a 5A and 5B? Yes. Will that mess up your rankings at all?
Perfect.
All right. 5A is going to be Dylan Gabriel for all the reasons I said. I'm kind of doubling down on Oklahoma. He's going to be the guy that will lead them, and I think he's going to just have ridiculous numbers. So if Oklahoma is 11-1 at the end of the season, clearly Oklahoma's done it before many times, and they could do it again with the Heisman winner. 5B, and this is a little bit of a hot take week 1 overreaction, but I'm going Anthony Richardson because of some of the highlight plays he made, just incredible against Utah. And if you're talking about guys that will have a chance to prove themselves in front of a national audience, Florida's going to have so many opportunities. They have another one against Kentucky. If Anthony Richardson goes out there for the 2nd week in a row, guides Florida to what will be 2 top 25 wins in a row, and has crazy jump pass, spin, whatever he was doing, he's going to be right in the mix because he's got the eyeballs of everybody.
Yeah.
You can't lose. I mean, you can win a Heisman in 5 or 6 weeks. Lamar Jackson did that. I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson, but I'm saying if Florida can rack up a bunch of wins early in the season, he's going to be the front runner, and he might be hard to dethrone. So I've got to list his name there, and that's kind of maybe my week 1 overreaction, but I'm comfortable putting him there for now.
Hey, I love it. The Caleb Williams, I'll forgive you on that one. You're a guest, so we'll forgive you. Go ahead.
See. No. I'm just going to say I don't think he deserves being put there now. I'm just thinking about all.
Of course.
USC is going to be 5-0 before assuming they take care of business against Stanford. They'll be 5-0 before they head to Utah, which should be a really, really good game.
Yeah.
So they'll be right there. They'll be top 5 arguably at that point too.
Yeah, I get it. I'm high on USC. So for me, number 1 is still CJ Stroud for me. I still feel like, he didn't have a great game, but he didn't have a terrible game. So he didn't do anything that would hurt him. CJ Stroud is 1 for me. I still have Bryce Young at 2. I think Bryce Young had a heck of a game. He didn't throw for a lot of yards, but he had 6 touchdowns. I'm sorry. Anytime you score 6 touchdowns or throw for 6 touchdowns or whatever, it's still impressive. For me, this is where it starts changing. For me at 3, I have Hendon Hooker. So originally I had Travian Henderson. I feel like Hendon Hooker is going to throughout the year here is going to start picking up steam. Josh and I both love Hendon Hooker, what he did last year, and then what I think he's going to do this year as well. 4 for me, I actually have 2 running backs here. So 4 for me, I have Travian Henderson. I think secretly, if he runs for another 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 yards, I think he could be right up there. And then 5 for me. So I'm breaking mold here, but 5 for me is going to be Braylon Allen, the running back from Wisconsin.
I like that.
Who last week I said was my secret pick to come up into my rankings. I just feel Devin Leary didn't wow me. And so I feel like he's going to slip out of my top 5 for the Heisman watch, and Braylon Allen goes in at 5. And actually at 6 for me, really like the not so there, but is AR-15, Anthony Richardson. I agree with you, everything you said on that. I really think he could be there. But right now I have 2 running backs, which I think is unheard of in Heisman watch list. But yeah, that's mine. Josh will post his. So basically what's going to happen is, for all of you that are listening out there, is that all 3 of us, it will be posted on our Instagram right before the game starts. So on Friday and Saturday, this will be posted so you guys can see, and you can ridicule Aaron, tag him. Don't tag me, tag
That's
Aaron.
right.
It was his pick. Yeah, I think the lists were pretty good. I think solid list we have, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean that's a good variety of players. I'd even throw like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think if we're talking running backs,
That's true.
simply just by being on Alabama, I think his name could be there at the end of the year. He's also a tremendous pass catcher out of the backfield, so I think he's going to rack up some crazy numbers for Alabama. As much as it pains me to just throw another Alabama player, it's just the reality because they're really, really good at football. So,
I totally agree with you. And so to finish up the episode, I have 2 questions for you. 1, give me a prediction of the Panthers Browns game for week 1, the Baker Mayfield comeback. And the second question is, will the Lions win week 1?
I think first question, I think the Panthers are going to win by 10 points.
Oh,
in fact, we have a new thing that we're introducing on our podcast where we're kind of doing the old NFL Eliminator Challenge. I did not pick Carolina because I wasn't quite that bold. I picked the Saints to beat the Falcons this week, but I almost thought about taking the Panthers week 1. So I just think Baker Mayfield's going to be upset, and he has every right to be upset in my mind. I'm from Ohio, so usually I root for the Browns. Sorry, not this season. Sorry, Ben. It's not going to happen. I will be actively rooting against them.
Don't worry. I will say this. I'll pause you there. Josh is very much pro Baker, and he was very upset with the whole Deshaun Watson thing. I'm more upset now. I was upset too about it for a little bit, but now I'm more upset at the NFL for just making their mind up about the whole Watson thing. I don't care what you do. Just stop playing the political game. You're literally having him come back the week they play the Houston Texans.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That whole thing. Yeah. So that's besides the point. But yeah, so I agree with you in a sense that I think it's going to be a really close game. Josh picked the Panthers to win. He's a Browns fan. I'm a Browns fan. I picked the Browns to win. I think the defense for the Browns might be just enough to get them, and the offense will score just enough to win. At least in my mind. And the second question is, as I said, will the Lions win week 1?
They will not win week 1, but they will be better this year. I think they win 6 or 7 games.
What?
Look, I'm going to take everything I can get from my Detroit Lions. Next year's NFL draft will once again be their Super Bowl. We are now that Matt Stafford has won his title, the Detroit Rams fans should go away because however bad the LA Rams do this year, it favors us because we again have their first round draft pick. So all respect to everyone on that team. And I think they're going to have a great year. So it won't matter, but I'm rooting against the Rams this year. I do like Detroit to win 7 games. 7. I'll be optimistic.
And I think we both can agree that the Bears will absolutely suck this year. That's an inside joke on this show. So,
I mean, they're actively trying to murder Justin Fields. So.
I know it's going to be crazy. But I will say, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah. As you guys all know, he was my first guest on the podcast way back like a year ago. So it's awesome to have you back. And thank you for filling in for Josh too. So you're kind of playing a 2-hat there. So I appreciate that. But before we finish up, why don't you go ahead and plug everything you're doing over there? So maybe some new things are happening over there at 5th and Goal and where you can find you guys.
Yeah. So I'll kind of start with everything going on. We do have a lot going on.
I know.
So we're kind of on all the social media platforms. Myself and one of my co-hosts on the Fifth and Goal podcast, Johnny Gaunt, who has been on this show. You may have heard him before. We're actually heading to Oxford, Ohio for Miami Red Hawks football game. We're going to be covering that. So we're looking forward to that. We're calling it our college football tour. I don't know how many stops to our tour we have yet. That's kind of TBD, but we've got this one lined up. So we'll be there live in person covering the game, which we're excited about. But we've got videos kind of out on every platform. So regardless of what your favorite social media is, we're on it. So look us up on Facebook, where, as I mentioned, we have many angry Florida fans saying, "Oh, how could you put Utah in your playoff?" So you can just join on in. Keep the conversation going there. I guess we're on Instagram and TikTok at Fifth and Goal Sports. We're also on Twitter, where we have conversations like the one that Ben and I had all the time, just debating back and forth about, is a 12-team playoff good, bad? What's happening in sports? Oh my goodness, East Carolina missed another field goal. That's happening on Twitter at Fifth Goal Sports there. And then our website, fifthandgoalsports.com. We've got some merch that Ben was so gracious to rock tonight. So you'd love to see it. We've got that there. We've got articles. We've got team previews that are on the way. They're a little bit late, but we've got team previews on all 131 FBS programs. A little like 2-page, just kind of.
Was that Johnny just being bored?
No, that was me being bored mostly. So, so that's there as well. So even if you're not a fan of Arkansas State, hey, maybe you're a Buckeye fan and you want to know what the scoop is on the Red Wolves, you can do that at our website. So those will be up shortly. We're a little bit behind on that, but that's on the way. So I think that's it. But yeah. Ben, thanks for giving me a chance to plug all that, and thanks for inviting me on. It's always good to talk sports with you and Buckeyes, and I think we're in for a very good year.
Yeah, we're in for a great year. And again, I was at the beginning of Fifth and Goal, and so it's so cool to see how far you guys have come. And of course, I have to wear the merch because I mean, I'm the only one in Europe that has this. So I'm like luxury. Right. I have a luxury brand.
That's right.
But no, honestly, thank you so much for Aaron for coming on. If you guys love their stuff, I'm going to link it all below so you guys can go check it out. Click it.
Oh, and the podcast. I don't think I said the podcast.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, whatever. Everyone knows that. But anyways, if you guys have loved this episode of my podcast, of our podcast, Josh and I, go ahead and like, subscribe, all that, share it. We had a few videos previously hit 2,000 views on YouTube. That's awesome. Which is just amazing. So that's thanks to you guys, because you watch it. I'm not watching it 2,000 times. You kidding me? And so thank you guys so much for that. And so make sure you like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And then if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you're listening, go ahead and give us a rating, because you can rate who's better looking, Johnny or Aaron.
But just solely based on our voice. Because this is a podcast, so you have no idea. We there's a reason why we might be hiding behind a microphone right now. So you have to decide. Yeah,
who is better?
Who's more attractive?
Yeah, who's better attractive, Johnny or Aaron? So, but anyways, if you guys can do that, that'd be great. Josh and I really appreciate it. Josh will be back for the next week's episode. We'll be probably talking NFL football, recapping NCAA, a whole bunch of stuff. So stay tuned for that. And as always, guys, be safe out there. Enjoy college football this weekend. Go hang out with your family. Spend time together. And until next time, we'll see you.